So today I went ahead and did the 100-hour oil change on the VX Deluxe with the TR1 motor. This is a 2017. First step is to warm the oil up a little bit. Put your adapter in there, your hose adapter. Go ahead and start the engine up, and then after the engine is started, start turning on the water. And just turn it on enough until you start seeing it come out in a pretty steady stream across out the hole on the left side of the Waverunner there. So once it gets steady, that's good. You just leave it like that. If the weather is 70 or above, it says you just have to leave it warm up for 5 minutes. If it's lower than 70 degrees Fahrenheit out, go ahead and add another 5 minutes, it says in the manual. So I just used a stopwatch. And while that's warming up, you can collect your items. I use the Yamalube 4W, which is their 1040 marine oil, the OE Yamaha filter, which is made by Denso, and a filter wrench with a torque wrench and an oil extractor to get the oil out. So once your time's up, go ahead and shut off the water first before turning off the engine. As you can see, my hose is leaking all over inside the compartment. Most of those adapters leak, but that hose is leaking too. When all's done and your extractor is clean, just use that to clean out the water in the hole as well. So I always put the cap back on the coolant tube so nothing can get down there while I'm doing any work. And then it's just a matter of, since it was leaking all over, before you play around with the oil, make sure you dry everything off really good so you don't risk getting any water into any areas where oil will be coming out of or going into. So there are two areas where you take out the oil. There's a hose on top of the engine, which I'll point out, and also through the dipstick. But before I start extracting the oil, I like to go ahead and actually check it to see if it was at the right height. That way, if it was correct level, I can just go ahead and put the exact same amount in that I took back out, and that should put me right where I need to be without having to make too many adjustments. So when checking the oil, always screw the dipstick all the way back in. First you want to unscrew it, wipe it, then screw it all the way back in, and then unscrew it again and check the oil level. Hard to tell from there, but it was at the full mark. That's the first time I've used the GoPro on my head, so got to get used to that a little bit. Not too good at it yet. So there's a clamp holding the tube, the extraction tube, on the top of the engine. You just slip that clamp off, and then that hose should pull off easily. If it doesn't, just wiggle the hose back and forth a little bit, and it'll loosen up. Sometimes when they get hot, they tend to stick on there a little bit. So that's going to be one of your extraction points, and then the second one is going to be where you had your dipstick. So I think you're supposed to start at the dipstick side first, but I don't really believe it matters. I just go ahead and put the extractor down the hose all the way until it bottoms out. Just push it and wiggle it a little bit until it bottoms out there. Put a few pumps on the extractor, and you should start seeing your oil coming out from that end. That oil still looks a little thick. I probably could have let the Waverunner warm up a little bit longer. So this is a pretty long video, so feel free to fast forward through sections that seem a little bit long or just repetitive in nature there. There's the collector collecting the oil there. And there's not quite as much oil on this part of the engine as there is through the dipstick. So this will drain out pretty quickly, or suck out pretty quickly. Start seeing bubbles. You can let it go a little longer if you want, but it's not really imperative to get every drop of oil out of that thing. So then from there, go ahead and remove it and place it in the dipstick hole. Now, there's a lot of times guys complain that they're not able to get that much oil out of these. They take 3 quarts or about 3.4 liters with the filter changed. And I know the reason for that is there's actually 2 levels inside that dipstick. If you push your extractor in there, it'll bottom out fairly quickly. But if you start wobbling it around in there and continue to put pressure on it, you'll find another hole where it goes down deeper. So I think when I was doing this the first time, I didn't have it all the way down right there, and you'll see I then put it in deeper into that dipstick hole. But you just have to feel around for it, because it'll go down like maybe a few inches at first, and then it'll go down like a few more inches after that if you're wiggling it around and pushing at the same time. So that would be the secret. If you notice you're not getting 3 quarts of oil out of it, you're probably not finding that second hole that's in the dipstick area. So this part's quite long because the oil's thick and moving out slowly. Yeah, I apologize for the long video of just sucking the oil, but I figured I'd just do the whole thing, and if someone wants to fast forward, we could do it. Just skip ahead. So again, just making sure that it went all the way down in that second little hole that's further down inside the dipstick tube, because sometimes it doesn't. And it looks like we've got pretty much all the oil out of that now. So what I like to do is then go back into the tube and try my luck in there again, because usually you can get a few more ounces out of that as well as it's been sitting. And as you can see, we're getting a little more oil out of there. So I think overall, when I look at it later on, it's like a little over the 3 quarts, maybe like 3.3 quarts or somewhere in there out of the 3.59 that it should or the total that you could get out of it. Keeping in mind that a couple of ounces are in the oil filter as well. So went back in the dipstick tube just one more time, and that will pretty much do it for getting the oil out of the machine. Okay, so now that all the oil is out, it's time to take the oil filter off, and it's a 2-inch oil filter wrench that you can get in there. Mine's pretty old and beat up, so it's really could use to be replaced, but it's still working. So now be careful as you unscrew the oil filter. There is oil in it. There's maybe a few ounces in there, or an ounce or two, I don't know, but as you unscrew it, it will start leaking out, and there's a channel under the oil filter on the block that goes to where my hand is at there with the rag, so the oil will actually start flowing out that channel. So you want to make sure you catch it, or you'll get it all over the hole. There's also going to be some oil still in the oil filter, so there are some areas that will collect the oil so it doesn't get all over the place, so you can just mop it up right there with the rag, and just want to get that nice and clean so you don't have it all over. And then the new oil filter, of course you want to clean it as best as possible, but the new oil filter, generally I like to put a little oil on the rubber gasket that's on the bottom of them, but these new OE Denso ones already have some kind of grease on there, so I don't feel the need to do that. If there's something I should be putting on there, then let me know, but it seems that it already has some type of grease on it that'll help seal that O-ring, that rubber O-ring on there. So they do suggest torquing this to 12.5 foot-pounds, which is not a lot of foot-pounds. In fact, my torque wrench there is probably not very accurate at doing 12.5 foot-pounds because it's a little bit big. Probably could use a smaller one to do that, so we want to be careful just not to over tighten it and to strip out any of the threads on it. Then once that is set, you're ready to go ahead and fill the engine. So put that extractor hose back onto the valve cover post that it has there by the valve cover. Once it's on there, put that clamp back over the nipple so that's secured. And then there's one filler on the valve cover, and then the dipstick hole will be the second filler. And what you need to do, it says to divide the oil that you're putting in, so half goes in the top valve cover area, half of it goes down by the filler. It takes about 3.6 quarts or 3.59 quarts of oil. So basically a good starting point when you start checking is to do about 1.5 quarts in the top and 1.5 quarts in the bottom roughly, and then you can adjust it after you do your oil check, your final oil checks there. And if you fill it too high, you can just use the extractor, clean the tube off your extractor, and just suck some of it back out. Okay, so you put 1.5 quarts in the top and about 1.5 quarts in the bottom, because I was able to get just a little bit over 3 quarts out of the engine, so maybe I got like 3.2 quarts. So as I fill this up, I'm trying to put the same amount in as what I got out of it, so roughly about 3.2 quarts out of the 3.5 5.9 quarts that the engine would take if I could get everything out of it during the oil change. So once you have it where you think it's good, go ahead and clean your oil up. Make sure you don't get oil on the decking of the Waverunner because it will stain it, so be very careful there. I had to clean some off right away because it stains it pretty quick. Then go ahead and put your cap on for the valve cover, and put your cap on for the dipstick. And you can't just check it at this time. You do have to run the Waverunner just for a little bit, because that's how you always check the oil on these. Run it for a while. Says 6 minutes to warm them up. I don't do that on the oil change side of it after putting the new oil in. I just run it for a couple of minutes. So just cleaning up all the oil in there, making sure that I'm not going to have a mess left over. So that is pretty much the procedure that I follow for changing the oil. I'm not a mechanic, so I think I'm doing it alright because I'm following what the manual says. If anybody sees something that looks incorrect or that I should definitely change, let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching this. And as I mentioned, to check the oil, hook your water source back up, start the Waverunner, and then after it's started, start manipulating the valve to get water to go through the cooling. So you always want to have it started before you turn your water on, and you always want to have your water off before you turn your motor off. So I just ran it, I think, for like a couple minutes here. So after letting it warm up again and circulate the oil for a few minutes, I go ahead and I turn the water off while the engine's running, and then turn off the engine. It's very important on these to make sure that you turn your engine on before you start putting water into the cooling tube, and that you turn your water off before you turn your engine off. That will keep you from having the risk of getting any water in through the exhaust and into the cylinder heads, which you definitely don't want to do. So we go ahead and dry it all off again. Now go ahead and check the oil. So you again take off the dipstick, loosen it up, pull it out, give it a good wipe, and then screw it all the way back in. Unscrew it, put it horizontal. It's a little hard to see here, but there is a notch about 3/4 of the way up where the full, well, it's almost about halfway on the stick where the full line is at, and I was looking a little bit lower than that, maybe about 3/4 of the way to the full mark, so actually got a little bit more oil out than I thought. Probably about 3.4 quarts out of the 3.59 that I needed, so not too bad. So I'll have to add a little bit more here because you can see where my nail is. It's below That's where the oil's at, and it's below that full mark by a little bit. So we'll just go ahead and add a little bit more oil into the dipstick. You can kind of get an idea when you look at how much oil to put in, because when you look at that space where the dipstick goes, you can kind of see how wide it is for the oil. So maybe just a couple more ounces there. And as you can see there, yeah, I got over 3 quarts in, so I'm pretty happy about that. Means got a lot of oil out of the engine. Might have left just a 0.2 quarts in there or so that's no big deal. Maybe if I went back and forth and kept sucking through the holes again, I would have got a little bit more, but it's not going to hurt anything. So now I'm going to go ahead and start it back up, because my feeling is that anytime you check the oil, if you want to get it accurate, you should have the engine run for a couple of minutes, and then you'll get a more accurate reading. I might not be 100% correct on that. Maybe just by topping it off real quick there, I could have checked it and it would have been fine, but I figure it's better to err on the side of caution than not, since once it's done, you want to have the oil at the right level. Okay, after drying everything off and putting the cap back on the cooler, hopefully this is the last time to check the oil, and wipe it off, screw it back in, unscrew it, and let's take a look at where we're at here. And that looks right there on the full line, so we look good to go. Go ahead and I like to just check it a couple times. We're already this far into it, might as well. And that is it. Appreciate your time in watching this. Figured I would do this because I always find a lot of videos that help me out on YouTube, so hopefully this has helped someone. If I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, please let me know right away so I can change that for my next oil change. Thank you.